In the modern era, it's pretty hard to avoid the Unreal Engine. I bet the technology behind it powers a ton of your favorite games without you knowing. Just to name a couple, Wukong, Dead by Daylight, Concord, Fortnite, Power World, even remakes of old games like the upcoming Metal Gear Solid Delta and the Silent Hill 2 remake. You see, back in 1998, the Stone Ages, I know, a young and soon-to-be billionaire named Tim Sweeney was inspired by the work of the tech wizards over at id Software on the Quake engine. The Quake engine is extremely influential in its own right, but the Unreal Engine, as you probably heard even if you aren't interested in video games, is one of the most successful and important game engines ever created. It probably introduced Tim into the tech wizard secret society alongside people like John Carmack and Ken Silverman. Unreal Engine 5 marks the first time in its 27-year history that an accompanying Unreal game was not made to show off the engine. Given that Unreal Engine 5 was released 3 years ago and Epic Games has shown it couldn't care less about its legacy, I mean, look at how hidden the Unreal section is on their website. It's like they don't even want people to know they made it. I feel obligated to show what it was like in the humble beginnings before Unreal Engine was used for television, movies, and by the FBI. Wait, what? 1998 was a really important time for FPS games. I'd say it was the biggest technological point since 1996 when Big JC made the Quake engine with true 3D real-time rendering that's also probably still helping power your favorite FPS games. Anyways, 1998. You might know a couple games, especially outside the FPS genre. No. We'll get to you soon. Wait your turn. Unreal was released on the heels of Quake 2, the sequel to the game that changed the genre as much as Doom did 4 years prior. And that was part of the identity Unreal was building. The Quake Killer, as they called it. Now, I wasn't around at this time. Both Unreal and Unreal Tournament are older than I am, but it does seem like it made id shiver their timbers a little bit. I mean, Quake 3 was entirely multiplayer, possibly to make sure that they could hold their top spot in the arena shooter genre, or maybe just because online multiplayer was the next evolution of the genre. Regardless, I wouldn't say Unreal killed Quake, but it did do a better job than anyone else. Because even with Doom 2016 and Eternal taking over Quake's original identity as a 3D arena shooter with an emphasis on movement and fast weapon swapping, it's still living through Quake Champions and the Night Dive remasters. However, I will argue that Unreal was a better Quake 2 than Quake 2 ended up being. It's not a bad game by any means, just not very memorable. The railgun is definitely ending up in the FPS Weapon Hall of Fame, but the rest is just bland. I'm sure the deathmatch is great, but I just never tried it. Some criticisms I've seen of these early FPS titles are that they're just tech demos, amounting to something of a technological arms race to be the most vivid game world. It's not a criticism that's always wrong. That philosophy is what made Duke Nukem Forever's 3,000-year development time happen. But it's important to look at these games in the context of the era. Expecting the quality of life and polish of a modern FPS experience is setting yourself up for disappointment. Innovation in technology drives creativity in gameplay experience, and that philosophy is what built id Software, and later Valve's, legacy. Criticizing these games as tech demos is missing the point. If developers wanted their game to sell, they would have to find a way to integrate tech into proven ideas to provide a brand new experience. This is why I give many games from this time a lot of leeway. Sometimes experiments don't work out, but seeing how some gave it their best shot makes me empathetic. I mentioned my grievances with Quake 2 earlier, and the word I would use to describe it is lifeless. It doesn't have any of the experimentation that makes the games from this era stand out. It was a formula, as soulless as the Strogg. But when I walked onto Napoli for the first time, I felt life. Man, you really don't get trailers like this anymore. This game was so advanced they even got portal technology. I don't even know what that means. This game was the Quake 2 I wanted after finishing all of Quake 1. It has everything Quake 2 did and more. Dynamic and colored lighting, high-quality skyboxes, deadlier enemies and AI that lead their shots and dodge yours, memorable weapons, even reflective surfaces in an FPS game in 1998, and flies that gather around dead bodies. I'm not sure why both games felt this was necessary. Quake 2 made the strange decision to shift from the eldritch horror theme, backed by foreboding, ambient tracks from Nine Inch Nails, over to the Space Marine setting with lifeless, metallic structures accompanied with, granted, a solid metal soundtrack by Sonic Mayhem. I think a big issue with Quake 2 is the atmosphere. Sure, the Strogg can be creepy, but look at what the Scar do on their first encounter. Unreal's whole thing was atmosphere, helped a lot by its soundtrack from 4 credited artists with a gigantic soundtrack. It's such great background music that I've been using it this whole video. Another point to the atmosphere is the art direction. An issue I see with a lot of the contemporary FPS games at this time is that the levels are just a means to an end, with that end being shooting things. Unreal's use of environmental storytelling shows how developers were finally able to start putting life into levels. Games around this time were starting to tell real stories, and that one overused Carmack quote really shows where the developers' priorities were before they had the technology to make real-ish scenery to fit their real-ish worlds and lore. If the levels weren't so pretty, I would definitely be a lot more frustrated exploring them. Also, I just need to mention some of the standout weapons in this game. I'll start with the flat cannon. My beloved. Seriously, one of the finest shotguns I've ever had the pleasure of using. It'll usually kill and even jibs most of the common enemies in 2 shots on hard mode, while chunking bigger threats like titans whenever you're forced to fight them. Nothing better than weaving in between scar shots to get a nice meat shot on that chunky model. Imagine this gun is the scatter gun from TF2, but the pellets ricochet and has an alt fire that just shoots a grenade. Honorable mentions include the ASMD, the game's railgun that knocks back anything hit by it or the blast. You know, not as good as the Quake 2 railgun, but that's a given. As well as the 8-ball, a rocket and grenade launcher hybrid that'll pulp any enemy if enough explosives are loaded. Because why shoot 1 rocket when you can shoot 6 at once, right? I could go into more detail about how Unreal took Quake's flow and improved upon it, but there's a much more important game that came out after Unreal that changed the genre for better and worse. Yeah, you can't really talk about a late 90s FPS game without mentioning Half-Life. Look, I love Unreal, but there's a reason why Half-Life beat it for the 1998 Game of the Year. It also doesn't help Unreal's legacy that the sequel kinda sucked and Half-Life 2 was regarded as one of the greatest games ever made, but that's a different story. Half-Life had a different take on what an FPS game could be. Linear level design with interactable NPCs that convey the narrative through contextual and environmental storytelling. Everything the player needs to know about Half-Life can be seen in the first half hour. They didn't need to have something explode in the first 10 seconds to draw your attention, or cutscenes that took the player's view elsewhere. Everything you see is through Gordon's eyes, and you're left to fill in the blanks. This is what happens when you hire a writer to help make a game. Now, even the linearity of the game becomes part of the narrative when it's revealed that you were working to further the agenda of whoever this guy is. Oh man, we're never going to figure out who or what he is, huh? Unreal did have storytelling as well, through the translator system that even let you read short logs kept by the Scar and Crawl to show that they are competent and intelligent, despite them being pretty obviously the bad guys while the human and Nolly were the good guys. But all this is to say that Half-Life did most things better. Barring bad level design and strange choices in a couple real stinker chapters like residue processing and, yeah, all of Zen. Like the Water Temple and Tyrannics were pretty bad, but not as bad as Half-Life at its worst, especially on hard mode. Oh god, that was painful. Anyways, even though the story is kinda nonsensical, the unbroken first-person narrative ended up doing enough to shift the genre into more linear levels with real stories. Now, when I say Half-Life changed the genre for the worse, I want to clarify that it's the lessons game devs learned from it rather than the things that made it unique. After that, it was Halo that changed the FPS identity with regenerating health, and I find in the same way you can see the skeleton of Half-Life be developed in Unreal, the feeling of stepping out into the ring world off the crashed ship for the first time and listening to the elites and grunts talk and react to your actions felt the same as walking out of the prison ship and reading through those alien logs with your translator. Epic clearly doesn't care about Unreal anymore, and the fact that they will only interact with the series in superficial ways says more than 1,000 words. Part of why I wanted to make this video was because I've seen far too many corporate game companies chase profit instead of enjoyment, stagnation instead of innovation, and apathy instead of respect. I guess I see the series as an outcome of one of my favorite childhood games, Team Fortress 2, a rotted husk of a once iconic franchise. It's a complete tangent, but as I'm editing this, the Team Fortress 2 SDK has been released to the public, which is just basically the source code of the game, and the developers essentially saying they're done. So, if you somehow stumbled upon this video without ever having played Unreal, please give it a chance, especially if you grew up playing Half-Life or Halo like I did. You can get it for free, that's how little Epic cares about it. Experiencing this game now makes me sad, realizing I'll never be able to play a new Unreal Tournament game. It's like missing a point in gaming history. When going back to this game, you can feel where the genre changed, almost like jumping into an alternate universe where Half-Life leaned more into its Quake influences. If you want to play it, I recommend using old Unreal. They have full game installers for Unreal Gold, as well as tutorials if you ever get lost in this game. Hell, I needed to walk through in certain areas, and it helped out a lot. You can even put it in your Steam library if you know how to set up non-Steam games. And it's thanks to groups like these that gaming history stays accessible, even though IP holders love nothing more than sitting on old franchises and doing nothing. Hopefully, I've shown why this game and series deserves to be remembered. Unfortunately, I can't see this series having a future, and there's no real way to twist this into a happy ending. They didn't even try to hop on the hero shooter bandwagon. Even Quake came back and managed to grab a foothold with a small audience. The most recently playable piece of Unreal was left unfinished in 2018 and kept alive by UT forever. But hey, look at that! Unreal Tournament got a Fortnite skin in a dedicated secret level episode. I wonder what else got one. Oh. Epic's complete apathy towards the series that built their legacy is appalling. They even admit as much on their website. Look, they're so thankful to the series that they've delisted it from their app. Shout out to the modding scene of all these games. Without them, I couldn't have had the opportunity to show people a part of FPS history. I'm especially looking forward to Unreal Redux whenever it's done. The closest to a Black Mesa-style remake we're gonna get. Till then, though, I got a little something for the higher-ups at Epic.
Keep stepping at your, keep stepping at your own